Good morning, everybody. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the forum. The last UN General Assembly made a global call to rescue the Sustainable Development Goals. It called on all of us to get back on track to building a better world that leaves no one behind. Certainly, migrant workers don't leave their families behind. Each of the more than 1 billion national and international migrants in the world today has a story to tell. And the majority share something in common. They provide remittances to their families back home. They leave home so their families do not have to, so that they can stay in their hometown villages and invest in a brighter future for their children. Remittances help families and communities in a variety of ways. They help people improve their health and nutrition and keep their children in school. In some cases, remittances are used to improve housing and sanitation, and they enable people to acquire assets, start business, and strengthen their livelihoods. That way, they are contributing to improving livelihoods and stronger resilience. In short, remittances are fundamental to achieving all of the SDGs. In 2022, $647 billion were registered in formal remittances flows to low and middle income countries. These figures represent more than 3 times official development assistance. Let me repeat it, more than 3 times official development assistance. Remittances flows are also higher than foreign direct investment in almost every developing country. Half of these flows go to rural areas where poverty and hunger are concentrated and where remittances make the most difference to people's life. That is why a key development challenge for all of us in this room is to maximize the impact of the projected $5 trillion in remittances to be received by families living in developing countries between now and 2030. IFAD's mission is to invest in rural people, and the scale and scope of remittances are a very important tool. It is in rural areas that remittances can help make migration a choice and not a necessity for current and future generations. Over the past 17 years, IFAD has co-funded over 70 projects in more than 50 countries, focusing on providing tailored opportunities for remittance receivers and their communities, benefiting at least 2 million people. Based on our experience, we know that given better opportunities to save, remittances families will save more. We know that given appropriate investment options, customized to their circumstances and goals, they will invest more. And we know that if we give them opportunities to invest in education, healthcare, climate adaptation, remittances recipients will live better lives. Many of our efforts have been focused on Africa. We have started the Prime Africa initiatives together with the European Commission, the governments of Luxembourg, Spain, and Sweden. Prime Africa is being implemented currently in 7 countries: Ghana, Kenya, Morocco, Senegal, South Africa, the Gambia, and Uganda. The initiative is advancing digital options for sending remittances to even the most remote rural areas. It is promoting former channels to reduce costs and extend reach. And it is leveling the playing field by improving regulatory frameworks to enable competitions in remittance markets. These are all essential aspects of promoting the transformative role of remittances in rural communities, and we look forward to discussing them in more detail during this summit. Tomorrow, with the occasion of the United Nations International Day of Family Remittances, we will recognize the contribution of over 200 million migrants, half of them being women. These are the people who improve the lives of their family members, their entire communities and countries through their remittances. The day calls upon governments, private sector entities, as well as civil society to work together to maximize the impact of remittances. By taking action to help remittances families reach their own individual development goals, we will be directly engaging 1 billion people in rescuing the SDGs by 2030, one family at a time. I would like to finish today by wishing you all fruitful discussions during these 3 days of the summit as we look ahead on our common goal to achieve the 2030 agenda and all of the SDGs. Thank you very much.
This is a bit challenging, but we'll get there. Thank you, Mr. President, for your remarks. Now it is my pleasure and my honor to invite to the floor to share her remarks Ms. Christine Drat, and she is the United Nations Special Secretary General, Special Advisor for Africa. Please come to the podium.
Good morning. What a pleasure to be here from New York, believe me. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, thank you for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be with you today at the opening of this 2023 Africa Summit of the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development. Allow me to start by thanking our host, the government of Kenya, and the co-organizers, the International Fund on Agriculture Development, IFAD, and the World Bank. Our discussions these 3 days are critical, as remittances and diaspora finance can and should constitute a relevant source of financing for development. Since the specific technicalities of the challenge will be debated in detail during these days, I would like to ask your permission to focus this intervention on the political economy perspective of remittances. Beyond, allow me to say in a very open way, beyond the neoliberal thinking, because we need to reset the model and need to bring new angles to this conversation. As you know, this year marks the end of the first 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 and the midpoint of the implementation of 2030 Agenda. We are off track. Everybody knows. This is that everybody is getting nervous. And if you notice in any UN speech, at least 5 times, the term accelerating the SDGs are mentioned, because you are off or completely off track. This realization is a wake-up call, but it provides us with the opportunity to conduct a thorough assessment, to identify the factors that undermine our progress, and, above all, reset the model. COVID-19 and the ongoing global food, energy, and financial crisis have reverted development gains and undermined the capacities of African countries to advance towards sustainable developments. But let's be honest, we, Africans, we were off track even before, suffering the impact of these external shocks. We were much before off track. I believe Africa has not fully delivered the MDGs, so Africa has not built the resilience that was supposed to build during the MDGs. So African countries' efforts have been constrained due to 3 structural paradoxes that has affected the continent. The first paradox, a continent that has all the potential to become an agriculture power, but is chronic on food insecurity. Second paradox, a continent that has all possible energy sources, but lacks access to energy and electricity, a dark continent. The third paradox, a continent rich in financial flows. And now I'm saying natural, because natural everybody knows. I'm saying financial. Third, a continent rich in financial flows, but depending on external sources to finance its own developments. The third paradox, the financing one, is perhaps the most striking, as the global narrative has traditional picture Africa as a poor continent from a financial standpoint, unable to generate financial flows. This is false. This is not true. To understand this paradox, it is important to differentiate between generation of financial flows and mobilization of those financial flows for development. Creating financial flows requires an active economic fabric, and Africa has it. Mobilizing those flows that have been generated for development requires effective institutions, strong country system, and this is Africa's challenge. Every year, Africa loses over $300 billion. I'd like to repeat this number, if you allow me, Mr. President. Every year, Africa loses over $300 billion to 89 illicit financial flows, public spending inefficiency 70, almost 100 billion, inefficient taxes incentives 46 billion, and if we put 10% of the $1.3 trillion in pension funds that are placed abroad, we reach $300 billion. Furthermore, as I mentioned, African countries have over $1.3 trillion in pension funds, which to a large extent are invested abroad. This is again evidence of our incapacity to mobilize the financial flows that are generated in the continent. Someone cannot lose something that before has not had it. It's impossible. I just can lose my mobile if I have a mobile. So Africa has the capacity to generate these $300 billion. Furthermore, it suggests that in order to achieve sustainable financing, countries should focus their attention not so much on controlling stocks, but rather on controlling flows. And remittance and diaspora financing are just the low-hanging fruit. If we shift from stocks to flows, remittance are the low-hanging fruit. And this is the angle that we need to adopt to reset remittance flows business model. Last year, African countries received nearly $100 billion in remittance, almost 60% of the continent's GDP. And yet, we are not able to leverage them to advance towards sustainable financing due to our incapacity to control the remittance flows, where the overcost is the best proxy. All in all, remittances are the low-hanging fruit in this shift of approach that I'm proposing, moving from stock control to flow control. Because beyond their quantity, they are a quality source of financial flows. And I have been Minister of Finance for 10 years. I was Minister of Finance when the subprime hit Cape Verde. And believe me, thanks God to remittance, I managed to save the subprime crisis. 30% of banking deposits and 10% of GDP. Above all, is a huge macroeconomic policy that helps deliver stability. So as I was saying, all in all, remittances are the low-hanging fruit in this shift, because beyond their quantity, they are quality source of financial. They have demonstrated remarkable stability, counter-cycle behavior, resilience, and particularly during economic downturns and crises, as exemplified during COVID-19 pandemic. Tell me, who Minister of Finance in the world doesn't want to enjoy these type of flows? They are the beauty. They are just the perfect that we need. If remittances have all the characteristics that are needed to ensure the sustainability of financing, then the question is, why is it a resource vastly untapped, sometimes from a development standpoint. In my view, the main problem is that we are not taking the right approach. Why still consider remittance as an external source of financing, a source of international reserves, instead of approaching them as one of the components of domestic resource mobilization? And this will shift policy framework towards remarks. However, on average, 1/5 of the remittance to African countries are generated within the continent. 1/5. In some cases, the percentage is much higher. For example, over 50% of the remittance to Benin come from neighboring African countries. If you are aiming for the continent's regional integration as the end goal, why don't we start by addressing remittance from one African country to another as a domestic issue? Why not? These questions go beyond relabeling, because approaching remittance from a conceptual standpoint as a domestic source of financing implies acknowledge that the best way of leveraging them is through domestic resource mobilization systems. And the absence of effective domestic resource mobilization systems in Africa is the main reason why we lack control of remittances flows. From this point of view, the main problem with remittances is their limited use as tools with a potential development impact, recognizing already what they are already doing from a rural development standpoint. So remittances have traditionally had an income inequality reducing effect between regions, being a net transfer of flows from a developed country to a developing one. But they do not necessarily have the same inequality reducing effect within the country that receives the flows. And tapping the development potential of remittance entails creating an entire ecosystem conducive to innovation, entrepreneurship. This involves promoting fintech solutions, fostering financial innovation, and diversifying the range of remittance-related products and services. I'm talking about health insurance premiums, scholarship, other investment opportunities, incentivize savings, promote capital accumulation, and contribute to long-term development. This is the key change in focus that is needed. And this is the new approach requires domestic resource mobilization system. Of course, the cost of transfer is still an issue, and I'm sure that it will be vastly discussed in this forum. But this is not an insurmountable challenge. Mobile money transfers have proven to reduce the cost of remittance by half in many instances. In fact, African remittance markets have already pioneered innovative digital solutions that are leading to safer, cheaper, and faster remittance, at the same time are promoting financial inclusion for migrants and their families, as the president of IFAD, my dear colleague Alvar mentioned here. The main risk here is the digital divide, and I know that you are going to discuss this issue. But the risk can be mitigated. It can be addressed through effective institutions and country systems. Effective policy and regulatory frameworks are needed in Africa. We survived the past 6 years without strong country systems, without weak regulatory frameworks, without, allow me, cop and paste and cop policy frameworks. We survive. We are not going to survive the next 60 years. The rules of the game, the movement of the geopolitical tectonic plates is telling us we need to pay attention to the change of the rules of the game from a geopolitical standpoint. So strong country systems are needed to mobilize remittances as a source of development investments. To create innovative ecosystems, need to promote income distribution and avoid the economic growth model that Africa adopted from 2000 to 2015. From 2000 to 2015, we delivered Africa as a continent high economic growth rates, average 6%, but we did not deliver resilience. We grow, but we did not deliver resilience. This is the reason that we are so vulnerable to external shocks. So it is high time that we stop considering remittance as an external source of financing for development beyond our control and start approaching it as a domestic source that can be tapped, mobilized through effective domestic resource mobilization systems. The only way to increase policy space from a African government standpoint. Thank you, and I wish you 3 working, fruitful days. Thank you.
So really amazing remarks there and recommendations for us to reflect on for the next 3 days. So thank you very much, Ms. Doherty, for your wonderful insights. I now have the honor and the pleasure and I would like first to thank the government of Kenya for their support, their leadership in hosting this summit. And it's an honor for me now to invite to the podium to share with us a few remarks, Ms. Rosalind Njogu, Principal Secretary, State Department for Diaspora Affairs. Welcome to the podium, please.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Excellencies, distinguished delegates from the government of Kenya, distinguished delegates from international organizations and our friends, my distinguished panelists, governors of central banks, including our very own Daktari, private sector entities, civil society, community leaders, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And welcome to Kenya, a land of immense opportunities, vibrant culture, and remarkable progress. Karibuni tena. As we gather here for a common purpose to explore the realm of global remittances, it is a great pleasure and honor for us as the government of Kenya to host this esteemed global forum on remittances, investment, and development here in our land this year. Kenya remains cognizant of the impact remittances represent for individuals, communities, families, and economies around the world. In 2022, migrant workers abroad sent over $647 billion in remittances to their families back home in low and middle income countries. Africa in turn received over $100 billion of remittances last year. Kenya is known for its innovation and innovative revolutions, and we are the 3rd largest recipient of remittances in sub-Saharan Africa in absolute terms, following only Nigeria and Ghana. And for us here in Kenya, remittances have increased tenfold in the last 15 years, reaching an all-time high or record of over $4 billion in 2022, which accounts for nearly 3.4% of our GDP. And remittances are also our highest foreign exchange earner, now surpassing tea, coffee, tourism, horticulture, all of our traditional forex earners. At 6.2% of the send amount, the average cost of sending remittances to Kenya is still above the SDG target of 3%, but lower than the average cost for sub-Saharan Africa, which I think is 6.7%, according to the World Bank's report of 2022 and other intra-African corridors. So as we stand at the crossroads of opportunity, where technology, entrepreneurship, and social development converge to transform lives, Africa still remains the most expensive region in the world to send remittances to, with an average price point that I mentioned earlier. So ours really is to affirm our commitment as Kenya to promote a well-governed, inclusive, and profitable migration as espoused by our adoption of the UN Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration in 2018. And since 2009, Kenya has been a notable contributor with valuable insights to deliberations that paved way for the adoption of the United Nations International Day of Family Remittances in 2018, that recognizes a crucial role remittances play in poverty reduction, in socioeconomic development, and in our conversation on accelerating SDGs. In 2014, the government of Kenya launched the National Diaspora Policy, which has defined our engagement with our diaspora, which of course includes migrant workers, over the last decade, in which major milestones have been realized. Some of those include diaspora participation in the electoral process that we have continued to see and we continue to expand in every election cycle, the formation of diaspora associations, the formation of diaspora circles, which has led to a remarkable increase in diaspora remittances. Issuing out of that diaspora policy, now the State Department for Diaspora Affairs was formed in 2022 to address the concern Kenya's diaspora community, who form an integral part of Kenya's economy and social fabric, face. So really, the function of the State Department for Diaspora Affairs and the dream issues out of this policy of the 2014 that I mentioned. We recognize the significant contribution made through the skills, the knowledge, and the remittances of our diaspora community. In many ways, we think of the remittances not necessarily as external flows, but as a big part of our economy, as was mentioned earlier. Objective 19 of the Global Compact on Migration focuses on creating conditions for diasporas to fully contribute to sustainable development in all countries. In this respect, the government of Kenya continues to demonstrate its unwavering promise, excuse me, and therefore intends to engage the Kenyan diaspora in an increasingly constructive and productive manner to unlock and unleash their full potential. Objective 20 of the Global Compact promotes and supports both the International Day of Family Remittances and this Global Forum as important platforms to build and strengthen partnerships for innovative solutions on cheaper, faster, safer transfer of remittances with all the relevant stakeholders. Kenya continues to shape the global discourse and immensely contributes to the remittances ecosystem worldwide through various innovations, especially in our fintech industry and digital mechanisms like M-Pesa and other mobile payment platforms. By 2010, M-Pesa had become not only the first, but the largest mobile money network in the world, and it solved and continues to solve some of the biggest challenges in the remittance space, such as mobility, security, ubiquity, and cost. Our transformative platforms have revolutionized the way remittances are sent, received, utilized, and are transforming the lives of millions in Kenya and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe this forum is a space not only for the valuable discussions and one-to-one conversations among the participants on remittances, but also a space for us to strengthen our commitments to work together to devise solutions to the problems facing diaspora communities and migrant workers around the world. Let us reopen conversations about more equal and more open borders. As I conclude, I wish to affirm Kenya's commitment towards working with our diaspora and our friends within international and multilateral spaces to ensure that we reach our own sustainable development goals within the government of Kenya's bottom-up economic transformation agenda, which we call BETTER. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I extend a warm welcome to all of you and look forward to an engaging and fruitful Global Remittances Forum here in Kenya. And while you're here, if you're away from home, do not forget to sample our wonderful beaches, go on a wonderful safari, sample our world-class hospitality, and meet the people of Kenya. Thank you very much.